This is Between the Brackets, a Mediawiki podcast, episode 27, February 4th, 2019. Welcome to Between the Brackets. I'm Yaron Koren. And welcome to this fourth installment of BTB Digest, the summary episode for Between the Brackets for those who haven't heard the episodes or just want to hear some of the highlights again. In this episode, we'll hear clips from episodes from October to December 2018. By the way, if you like any of the clips you hear, I'd recommend to go and listen to that episode. There's a lot of good stuff in each of these episodes. And I should also note that this is sort of a special episode because it's now been almost exactly 1 year since I started this podcast, back in episode number 1 where I interviewed Cindy Chickles, which was February 6, 2018. It's kind of a cliche to say that it's hard to believe it's been a year, but it really is hard to believe. Still, the numbers add up. 26 episodes, 2 weeks each, and now this is number 27. It's been fun. I've learned a lot about podcasting and I guess about Mediawiki, and I hope you've enjoyed hearing from all these different people. So on with the digest. Back in October, I talked to Sabina Melnitsky, an Austrian independent Mediawiki consultant whose main business is called Wiki Ahoy. I asked her how she goes about marketing Mediawiki to potential clients, and here was her response.
To be honest, I hardly ever really pitch the software. That's not an approach I take. I always go in and say, I'm not going to sell you the software. That's not my job. It's open source software. I don't own it. I don't want to sell it to you. I want to see what sort of use case you have, what problems you want to solve, and we can see if Mediawiki can help with that. Funny thing is that most of the times it actually can help with the problem. And it appeared early on in this podcast also the idea of fast and rapid prototyping. So if you go in and say, maybe you even want to test another system, maybe you want to, create a database, or you need another knowledge management system, you can still set up the entire structure for yourself, test it out with Mediawiki, and then put it in another system later on, which not so many people do then in the end, but even that would work. Just to say, for me, Mediawiki is really strong in the combination of free text editing and database functionalities. So if you use the Mediawiki, the normal Mediawiki with semantic Mediawiki, you get that combination, and that is unique. I haven't seen that anywhere else in that. Combination. That is really the main selling point to me. That you can have a Google Docs or a Word document together with a FileMaker or any other database together. It's all in one, and it's very flexible in that combination.
Sabina is also one of the organizers of what is currently planned to be SMWCon 2019, or Semantic Mediawiki Conference, to be held this fall in Switzerland. I asked her about the name of the conference, since there had been some discussion about calling this conference EMWCon or Enterprise Mediawiki Conference instead.
I personally prefer Enterprise over Semantic Mediawiki Conference for the reason of I like the approach. I like the view from the use cases. What am I using it for? The knowledge management in using the wiki. More than the actual software, because to me that's secondary. And as you say, you could use Semantic Mediawiki, you could use Cargo, or you could even use FOSSWiki for solving the problems, and that's what's more important for me. Just for naming the conference, we just said I see different, and it's just a name, and we decided to follow with that convention that the SMW is the European version in fall, and the EMW is the North American version in spring.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned FOSSWiki. I mean, would you potentially want to see just an enterprise wiki conference?
Yes, that's what I'm interested in. Of course, I still think the community is so small that it could profit from a little bit more community members, even who are working with other software bits and pieces. And it's not going to be an enterprise conference where we're talking about all the enterprise problems. It's still all going to be about wiki. So, yeah.
Next, I talked to Pau Giner, who is a user experience designer for the Wikimedia Foundation. I asked Pau about the perception some people have that the main Mediawiki display and interface is under-designed. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, I think that probably one of the reasons why people or more general audience may have that impression is that in the past we have been focusing on projects that are not that visible to the general audience. For example, I guess that most people think of their experience on the desktop Wikipedia, and that has not been the target for improvements on readers. The improvements on readers were mainly focused on the mobile experience, because there was no mobile app or mobile version of the web that long ago, and that was what was the main focus of development and design from the reader perspective. And there were still many people thinking on how it was looking on the desktop. Also, another reason is that with such a wide ecosystem and having people also being used to seeing specific patterns, most of the time we have been focusing on iterations and gradual changes. So, for example, as you mentioned, with the filters, we were very, very focused on changing only the filter mechanism, and leaving other parts like the way changes are listed for the future. And it's just a reflection of the complexity. If you try to modify too many things at the same time, you're going to find lots of use cases and lots of uses that you have not anticipating. So I guess it's part of this combination. Our focus have been on mobile and also on contributing tools, not much on the reading experience on desktop, which is what people have in mind, and also the need to iterate on projects that have been used, that people are passionate about for a long while, and we need to be careful on the different use cases of a product that can get extended and used in many different ways.
Then I asked Pau if there was any specific project that he was proud of his involvement in, and he talked about the content translation extension. That's an extension notably used on Wikipedia to help editors create articles based on the corresponding article in another language.
Well, for projects that I have been involved, I'm really, really happy to see the impact of content translation. I think that it has been it has become for many wikis a common contribution tool. There are still aspects to improve, and that's why we are working on the new version of it. But I think that in terms of seeing the impact, and also being a case that we have been using to apply the style guide from the design team, I think that it has been really, really great to see the outcome. And it has been also not only adopted by many communities, but integrated in their day-to-day uses, and they have been measuring how they are more productive with the tool, and there have been very very nice stories out of that.
In the next episode, I interviewed Håkon VM Lee, who's best known as the inventor of CSS and was also the CTO of the company Opera, among other accomplishments. He He's also the public face of Rettspraxis.no, a wiki that holds a directory of the rulings of the Norwegian Supreme Court, and which was and remains the subject of a legal dispute by the organization Leaguepedia, which claims to hold a copyright on some of this information. We talked quite a bit about the legal aspects and some of the technical aspects of it, but for this show I wanted to highlight some interesting things he said just from the perspective of a web pioneer. First, I asked him his thoughts about Mediawiki, and he offered his thoughts on that as well as on Wikipedia and open source.
I think it's really, really great that we can take a framework and work for a few months and have a very good-looking, well-functioning website, make it available. If we had to start from scratch, that would have been a lot of work. And obviously, Wikipedia it's probably the best project that's ever been conceived of on the web. If the web only consisted of Wikipedia, it would still be worth it. It's such a great thing, and the fact that the software, the Mediawiki and all that is behind the scenes, is just a feel good story. I can't praise it enough. The open source, the openness of thinking here is a wonderful thing. That's one thing, talking about the Opera browser, that I was the CTO there for many years, and we never could become open source. We were very much open standards, but open source was, always one step too far for our business models. But the fact that we've had all these projects where the source code is open has been very, very important. And without it, we wouldn't have had an internet as we know it.
Later in the interview, he dropped an anecdote that shows that the web and the concept of open data have been intertwined since pretty much the beginning.
I remember Tim Berners-Lee, I shared office with him at CERN, and when I was publishing The Laws of Norway back in 1994, I did that first without asking him. I used the web servers of CERN because that's what we had available, and I had all these people in Norway scan and type laws, and they emailed them to me, and I put them up on CERN servers in my personal directory. And the problem in that personal directory is that it had a quota at the time. Hard disks were expensive.
Right.
And I remember, Tim coming into the office one afternoon and looking over my shoulder and asking, Håkon, what are you working on? What are you doing? And since I was working on these Norwegian laws and I hadn't told him about this, it was kind of sheepish saying, well, I'm publishing the laws of Norway on the CERN servers. and his response was, oh, do you need more disk space?
Oh, that's great.
So that was a good answer. He always wanted the web to be used for the common good. And that's something I hope that we can convey to others as well. All the people, there's so many more people involved today, of course, but we should all think about how to make sure that the web builds a better world.
By the way, if anyone's curious about the current status of that legal battle, it looks like the dispute between Rettspraxis.no and Leaguepedia is headed for the Norwegian Supreme Court, just as Håkon predicted it might. Which means that however the case turns out, you'll be able to read about it on Rettspraxis.no. I definitely wish them the best, though. The next episode was a talk with Corey Floyd, who is Director of Engineering for the Core Platform team at the Wikimedia Foundation. In this clip, I asked him about the current structural issues affecting the development of Mediawiki in the context of the Wikimedia Technical Conference, which had just been held. And Corey managed to include a brief history of the last 15 years or so of the Wikimedia Foundation's development organization. You gave a presentation at the beginning of the conference. I think it was called Process and Action, where you laid out what you saw as the goals and challenges involved in improving all the software. I saw the slides and the notes for that talk. I don't think there's a video of it. There's an interesting slide where you list all of what you call the frustrations around Mediawiki development. You put in around 20 of them. Some of the ones on the list are delivering a new feature is slow, getting code review is slow, hard to understand architecture, too many priorities, and unclear responsibilities. some of these, not all of them, but some of them sound like just an issue of too few developers, which you mentioned before. Would you agree with that? That really that's the answer for a lot of these? Just bringing in more people.
It's some of the answer, and I think a lot of the answer too is like just and this is like something everybody likes to say, but some process stuff I think has to happen too. It's just we used to be very small. It used to be all volunteer. And then,
right.
We had one person, Brian Vipper, and then he started, and then we slowly grew like an organization. And I think it's interesting because, a lot of organizations that run like have a big technical product, a lot of times they started like as like a 5-person like team, they were funded and they created the software and everything. But the organization came into being like with the software kind of already created and growing on its own. And like a lot of the chapters started that way. And so when you do that, it's a bit different rather than like starting out with everybody kind of like owning the code or like having like responsibility for pieces of the code. We've like grown and we're just trying to get a handle on having like, what we call operational responsibility, right? Like whether we write it or not, like maintaining it and being responsible for it, like once it's out in production and like the entire world's using it. And as you grow from like a small organization to a bigger organization trying to do that, you got to change how you work, right? The way you work with 5 people is much different than the way you work with 300. And so I think, that's probably where we've struggled a little bit. And while our platform might have issues, this is one of the things where I'm kind of a big believer in Conway's Law, which I'm not sure if you've heard of, but it's essentially, that your software you build models like the communication systems and, basically how your organization is set up.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Which is really interesting because you can look at different organizations and like their software. And I think if you look at our software and you think about how our organization, our community is put together, you're like, yeah, that seems right. Like we have a sprawling organization. It's very organic. It changes. We have tons of volunteers. Like we have tons of different, teams within like, the chapters, like including like the Wikimedia Foundation, and they work together in lots of different ways. And there's lots of different connections. And if you look at our software, that's also how it is. So, there's a bit of spaghetti code in the software, and that because we have a spaghetti organization. Everybody's like talking to each other in a lot of different ways. And so, kind of answer your question, do we need more people? I mean, I think so. That's my personal opinion. But we are, as I'd say too, we're also getting more people. Like they've actually listened, and for the Platform Evolution program is being funded to like fix a lot of these things, right? And we're getting more engineers. So I think the most important thing that we can do is basically show what the issues are to leadership, and so they can show what issues are to the board so we can get funding to fix them and get more people. It's not as easy as just add 1,000 people. It's like, hey, why don't you understand what the problem is, kind of make a plan to fix it, and say I need 4 people, and then ask for 4 people with a good plan, and then you can do it. So I think it's planning plus people is what we need.
Well, what can be done other than bringing in more developers? Is there a need for more hierarchy, more structure within the organization, so everybody has a clear sense of what their roles are?
Yeah, I think that's hard to say. Like, I do think some more structure needs to happen, but how we actually do it is like, unknown territory. Like we have a very different organization than most companies. Like we don't have a hierarchy top down like organization. We have like, a ground support, like ground up, bottom up like organization. And figuring out how to align people to do the same thing, but still also, like 1,000 flowers bloom is a challenge that not unique to us, but certainly we're at a scale that maybe most people don't have to deal with. So when we say, do we need more structure? Yeah, but I don't think it's as easy as like saying, oh, we need this like really strict hierarchy, top down, whatever. We need a way to be able to align everybody's efforts. And I think, people talk about consensus and things like this. And I think those are good ideals. I don't think we're really good at like saying, oh, that's consensus, right? Or that's enough. Like, so let's make a path. We kind of wishy-washy and go back and forth a lot. And so I think we just need to get better at saying like, yeah, we got enough buy-in on this, or we don't have enough buy-in on this, and just kind of make decisions.
Right. And I guess make it clear who is the one to determine whether there's enough buy-in.
Yeah, right.
You
That's
know,
a clear.
Who has ultimate authority.
Yeah, just clear ownership, right? It's like it's one of those things where and I think there's kind of a lot of pushback of like having like singular decision makers. Like having someone who makes a final call doesn't mean taking the power out of people's hands. It just means like, hey, once everybody's kind of said their piece, someone's got to move it forward, right? And that's in any case. So I think it's like balancing those two things, right? It's like a polarity, right? You got to like you want to get a lot of input, but ultimately you have to make some sort of decision and move forward. And there's a balance between those things. And we'll try different tactics to see which works.
And the last interview in this set is of Daniel Robbins, whom I know best as a Mediawiki consultant and the author of the foreword to my book Working with Mediawiki, but most people know best as the creator of the Linux distributions Gentoo Linux and Funtoo Linux. The first clip I included isn't related to Mediawiki, but I thought he gave an interesting answer. I asked Daniel about whether there's still any reason to make another Linux distribution, given that there are now literally thousands available to choose from.
Sure. I think creating a Linux distribution, first of all, it sort of proves the principles of open source, right? It's sort of like, I like the car analogy. If you build like a custom hot rod, you're basically using your engineering prowess. And I think that there's value in re-engineering things sometimes. So I definitely wouldn't say there's no point, because it can be a great learning experience. And there's also room for innovation. There's always room for innovation.
Next, I asked Daniel a somewhat related question, which was his opinion on Mediawiki distributions, the increasingly popular approach of bundling Mediawiki along with various extensions and sometimes skins as part of a single package. Here's what he had to say.
My recommendation would be to try to use straight Mediawiki if possible. I understand why prepackaged derivatives of Mediawiki exist. There's definitely a need to test and integrate different extensions together and make sure they're working well for people.
Yeah.
And, you're adding value when you do that, when you're testing and making sure it's working. But it's the other side of the coin is you can potentially get kind of locked into that flavor of Mediawiki, and then it becomes harder to leverage sort of the entire Mediawiki ecosystem. Whereas if you stick with vanilla Mediawiki, you're generally in a better position to leverage extensions. And also, if you're an organization and you need help from another Mediawiki consultancy, they can help you more. You're not necessarily locked into more than a single vendor.
Yeah.
Though I would say that, as distributions of Mediawiki are becoming more common, Mediawiki consultancies are also becoming familiar with them. So you don't necessarily just have one place to go when you need support. You often still have, other places you can go for commercial support if you need it. I think the one thing I would just, I don't know. I mean, I personally wouldn't I like using vanilla Mediawiki and going from there, but I understand the benefits of sort of the pre-bundled stuff.
And that's it for BTB Digest number 4. I hope you'll listen to the next episode as well, when we'll have a brand new person to talk about Mediawiki things with. Thanks for listening.